A Hell's Angel defends a black obese teen from a racist cop. And what happens next shocks the entire town. It starts with one brutal scene outside a gas station. A tattooed ex-biker sees a young girl being harassed by a cop and steps in. One move, one act of courage, and suddenly, the world is watching. But when the video goes viral, everything explodes. The biker becomes a hero to some and a criminal to others. His home gets vandalized. The girl's mother loses her job. And the same cop who started it all? He's not done yet. As their small town turns against them, this unlikely trio, an ex-con, a single mother, and her daughter, are forced to fight not just for justice, but for hope itself. Because behind the headlines lies a secret no one saw coming, a truth that could destroy them or heal them all. When hate meets mercy, who wins? And can a man once branded by hell become the angel that saves them? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The sun hung like a molten coin in the Georgia sky as Jack Hammer Hanlon guided his Harley into Peter's Gas and Go. The afternoon heat made the air shimmer above the cracked asphalt, and his leather jacket felt like an oven against his skin. Still, he wore it like armor, old habits from his Hell's Angels days dying hard. His parole meeting had gone as well as could be expected. Keep your nose clean, check in weekly, stay out of trouble. Simple rules for a complicated world. Jack's weathered face, creased with 60-plus years of hard living, reflected in his bike's chrome. Gray beard neatly trimmed now, but his eyes still carried the weight of memories he'd rather forget. The pump's digital numbers clicked slowly as he filled his tank. Just another quiet afternoon in a small southern town. That's when he heard it, the sharp crack of authority gone wrong. "I said empty your pockets, now!" Jack's head snapped up. Near the convenience store entrance, a police officer had a young black girl pressed against the sun-bleached wall. She couldn't have been more than 15, wearing a purple backpack and looking terrified. "I didn't take anything," she protested, voice shaking but determined. "I was just waiting for my mom to pick me up." The officer, Jack could read his nameplate from here, Callan, pressed harder. "Sure you were. You people always have some excuse." Jack's hands tightened on the gas pump. Every instinct screamed at him to stay out of it. His parole officer's words echoed in his head. "No trouble, Hanlon. One wrong move and you're back inside." The girl tried to turn around. "You can check my bag. I didn't—" Officer Callan grabbed her shoulder and slammed her back against the wall. Hard. "Don't you move!" Something snapped inside Jack. The sound of that young body hitting concrete brought back every wrong thing he'd ever seen and done nothing about. Before he could think better of it, he was moving. "Hey," his voice carried the gravel of decades of hard living. "That's enough." The officer's head whipped around, hand instantly going to his taser. "Stay back. This is police business." Jack kept walking, hands raised but stance solid. "She's just a kid, and you're hurting her." The girl's eyes met his, surprised, grateful, scared. Jack saw tears threatening to spill, but noticed how she fought to hold them back. Brave kid. "Last warning." Callan's face had gone red with rage. "Back off, old man, or you're going down." A small crowd had gathered now. Jack noticed a woman in a business suit holding up her phone, recording everything. Good. Let them see. "No, sir," Jack said quietly, placing himself between the officer and the girl. "I don't think I will. You want to arrest somebody? Take me in. But you're done pushing this young lady around." The taser came up. Jack could see Callan's finger twitching on the trigger, could practically taste the man's desire to show his power. The air crackled with tension. "You're protecting criminals now?" Callan spat. "Figures. Another nigger lover thinking he knows better than law enforcement." More phones came out. The racial slur hung in the air like poison. Jack didn't move. His voice, when it came, was steady. "I'm protecting a child from abuse of power, and you just showed everyone exactly who you are." The girl behind him, he'd learn later her name was Tessa, had stopped trembling. She stood straighter, drawing strength from his presence. Callan's radio crackled. Another unit was responding to a call nearby. The officer's eyes darted between Jack, the gathering crowd with their phones, and his own precarious position. Finally, he lowered the taser. "This isn't over," he growled, backing away. "Not by a long shot." Only when the patrol car had peeled out of the parking lot did Jack let out the breath he'd been holding. He turned to the girl, who was wiping her eyes with shaking hands. "You okay, miss?" She nodded, trying for a wobbly smile. "I think so. Thank you. I'm Tessa." "Jack Hanlon." He glanced at the crowd, still filming. "Looks like we might have just become internet famous." "My mom's stuck at work," Tessa said. Would you mind giving me a ride home? I don't want to stay here in case he comes back." Every rational thought told Jack to say no. He was on parole. He'd already risked everything stepping into this situation. Giving a minor a ride could look bad in all sorts of ways. But looking at her scared, hopeful face, he couldn't say no. "You got a helmet in that backpack?" She shook her head. Jack reached into his saddlebag and pulled out his spare. "Here, safety first." As they pulled away from the gas station, Jack could feel his phone buzzing in his pocket. The video was probably already spreading across social media like wildfire. His quiet existence had just gotten considerably louder. Tessa's arms were wrapped tight, around his waist as they rode through the afternoon heat. She gave directions between turns, her voice carrying over the wind. Jack couldn't help but notice how she gradually relaxed, the tension from the confrontation melting away with each mile. "Left up here," she called out. "The blue house with the roses." As Jack slowed to a stop in front of her home, he realized something profound had shifted in his world. He'd spent years trying to stay invisible, to atone quietly for his past mistakes. But sometimes, he thought, redemption doesn't come in the ways we expect. Sometimes it comes in the shape of a teenage girl who needs someone to stand up for her, even when every logical reason says to walk away. Tessa handed back his helmet, her eyes serious. "You could have gotten in big trouble for helping me." "Probably still might," Jack admitted. "Then why did you do it?" Jack was quiet for a moment, considering. "Because it was right, and sometimes that's the only reason you need." She nodded, understanding something deeper than his words. As she walked toward her house, Jack knew his life was about to become complicated again. But watching her reach her door safely, head held high, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. The Harley's engine rumbled to life beneath him. Whatever storm was coming, he'd face it. Some things were worth the risk. The front door of the modest blue house opened before Tessa could reach for her key. Lydia Coleman stood in the doorway, still in her wrinkled scrubs from her night shift at the hospital. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion, but concern instantly sharpened her gaze as she took in the scene before her teenage daughter, and a weathered biker with gray in his beard standing on her front walk. "Tessa?" Worry threaded through that single word as Lydia's eyes darted between her daughter and the stranger. Her hand tightened on the doorframe, body tensing as maternal instinct kicked in. "Mom, it's okay," Tessa said quickly, stepping forward. "This is Mr. Hanlon. He helped me at the gas station." Jack hung back, keeping his stance deliberately non-threatening. He'd seen that look of protective fear before, a mother sizing up potential danger to her child. His leather jacket and tattoos didn't exactly scream trustworthy in most people's books. "There was trouble," he said quietly, "with Officer Callan." Recognition flickered in Lydia's tired eyes. "Brett Callan?" Her voice carried a weight of understanding that spoke volumes. Tessa's words tumbled out in a rush. "He was hassling me again, Mom, saying I was loitering and stealing, but I wasn't. I was just waiting for my change. He pushed me against the wall, and Mr. Hanlon stepped in. He stood up to him when nobody else would." Lydia's expression shifted as she processed this, fear giving way to a different emotion entirely. She looked at Jack again, really seeing him this time. "You protected my daughter?" Jack shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude in her voice. "Anyone would have." "No," Lydia said softly. "They wouldn't. Please, come in. Let me at least feed you dinner as thanks." "Ma'am, that's not necessary. I insist." There was steel beneath her gentle tone. "It's the least I can do." The interior of the Coleman home was modest but immaculately kept. Family photos lined the walls, Tessa through various ages, and a man with kind eyes, and Tessa's smile, who Jack assumed was her father. The furniture was worn but clean, throw pillows arranged with care on the sofa. It was the kind of home that spoke of love rather than money. "I hope you don't mind rice and beans," Lydia said, leading them to the kitchen. "It's what I had planned for tonight." "Sounds perfect," Jack replied, noting how the kitchen showed signs of careful budgeting. Store-brand products, bulk dried goods, the kind of shopping habits of someone stretching every dollar. While Lydia warmed up dinner, Tessa set the table, moving with the comfortable familiarity of routine. Jack noticed she'd stopped trembling, her movements more sure now that she was in her safe space. "So you're a nurse?" Jack asked, trying to ease the lingering tension as they sat down to eat. Lydia nodded. "Night shift at County General. Not glamorous, but it pays the bills." She served the simple meal with quiet dignity. "What about you, Mr. Hanlon?" "Jack, please. And I do odd jobs, mechanical work mostly." "Like my Thomas," Lydia said softly, then caught herself. Pain flickered across her face before she could mask it. "Mom's husband," Tessa explained, her own voice growing quiet. "He was killed 2 years ago. Hit and run." Jack saw how Lydia's hands tightened around her water glass. There was more to this story. "The police said they investigated," Lydia continued, bitterness seeping into her words. "But they never found the driver. Never seemed to look very hard, if I'm being honest. Thomas was... He'd filed a complaint about some officers the week before, about racial profiling at traffic stops." The pieces clicked into place. "Same department as Callan?" Lydia met his eyes. "Yes." The rice and beans were simple, but good, seasoned perfectly. They ate in silence for a moment, the weight of shared understanding hanging in the air. "He was teaching me about cars," Tessa said suddenly. "Dad, I wanted to work in his shop someday." She pushed her food around her plate. "Officer Callan, he says I'm trouble. Says I'll end up just like my dad if I'm not careful. Like that's a bad thing." Jack watched Lydia close her eyes briefly, pain and anger warring on her face. "Your daddy was a good man," Jack said firmly. "Anyone who says different isn't worth listening to." Lydia looked at him then. Really looked at him, like she was seeing past the leather and tattoos to something else. "You're right about that." They finished dinner with lighter conversation, Tessa gradually relaxing enough to share stories about school and her dreams of becoming a mechanic. Jack found himself smiling more than he had in years, drawn in by the genuine warmth of this little family. When it was time to leave, Lydia packed him a container of leftover beans despite his protests. "Thank you," she said at the door. "Not just for dinner, for seeing my daughter as a person, not a threat." Before Jack could respond, Tessa stepped forward and hugged him quickly. "Thank you for seeing me," she whispered, then darted back inside, suddenly shy again. The night air was cool as Jack walked to his bike. His chest felt strangely light, like some invisible burden had shifted. He couldn't explain it, but something about this evening, the simple meal, the honest conversation, the trust in Tessa's hug, had touched something long dormant in his soul. He didn't know that at that very moment, the video of him standing up to Callan was being shared across thousands of screens. Didn't know his quiet life was about to change dramatically. All he knew was that, for the first time in years, he felt like he'd done something purely right. The morning sun hadn't yet cleared the horizon when Jack's phone started buzzing. Messages flooded in from numbers he didn't recognize. He squinted at the screen, confusion turning to understanding as he opened a local news link. There he was, larger than life on the screen. The shaky phone footage showed him standing between Officer Callan and Tessa, his weathered face set in that stern expression he knew too well. The headline scrolled beneath, "Ex-convict confronts police officer, hero or menace." Jack rubbed his tired eyes. Channel 5 News had already branded him the biker defender, while Channel 7 questioned if he was a dangerous criminal threatening law enforcement. His past convictions were splashed across screens like warning labels. The sharp rap at his trailer door made him jump. Sheriff Caleb Darnell stood there, hat in hand, looking as uncomfortable as Jack had ever seen him. "Morning, Hammer," the sheriff said, using Jack's old nickname. "Mind if I come in?" Jack stepped aside. The sheriff's boots clicked on the linoleum floor as he entered the small space. They'd known each other for 30 years, ever since Jack's brother Tommy had brought his rookie partner home for Sunday dinner. "Coffee?" Jack offered. "Better not. This is official business." Caleb sighed, his weathered face creasing with worry. "You're stirring up trouble, Jack. That video's gone viral. Half the town's calling you a hero, the other half wants your head on a pike." "I did what needed doing," Jack said simply. "I know. That's what worries me." Caleb placed his hat on the small table. "Look, Tommy would have wanted me to watch out for you. You're on parole. One wrong move. And what? Back to prison for stopping a cop from roughing up a teenage girl?" Jack's voice was quiet but firm. "That what Tommy would have wanted?" The sheriff's face tightened. "Just keep your head down, please. Things are tense enough without—" A car horn blared outside, followed by the sound of breaking glass. By the time they reached the door, the vehicle was gone, leaving only shattered beer bottles and spray-painted slurs across Jack's trailer walls. Caleb pulled out his notebook. "I'll file a report." "Don't bother." Jack was already getting his broom. "We both know nothing'll come of it." The sheriff lingered a moment longer, then left with a tired nod. Jack spent the next hour sweeping glass and scrubbing paint, his movements methodical, refusing to let anger take root. His phone buzzed again. A text from Tessa. "Mom got suspended from work. They said she's causing trouble. It's not fair." Jack's hands tightened on the broom handle. He remembered Lydia's gentle efficiency, how she'd served dinner with quiet dignity despite her own struggles. The hospital's action felt like a punch to the gut. Later that afternoon, he rode to the school, parking his Harley across the street. He watched students stream out, finally spotting Tessa. She walked alone, head down, clutching her books like armor. A group of girls pointed and laughed. One boy made oinking noises as she passed. Jack's jaw clenched. He kicked his bike to life, following at a distance as Tessa walked home. She never looked up, never saw him watching over her. The Colemans' small house looked different in daylight. Moving boxes were stacked on the porch. Lydia stood among them, her nurse's scrubs exchanged for worn jeans and a faded t-shirt. "Eviction notice," she explained when she saw him, trying to smile. "Apparently, I'm disrupting the community." "Mom, we can't leave," Tessa protested. "Where will we go?" Jack spoke before he could think better of it. "I've got an RV behind my trailer. Not much, but it's yours if you want it, till you get back on your feet." "We couldn't," Lydia started. "Please, Mom," Tessa whispered. "I'm scared here." Lydia looked at her daughter, then at the boxes, then at Jack. He saw the moment pride gave way to practicality in her eyes. "Just until I find work," she agreed. They spent the evening moving boxes. The old RV wasn't much. Jack had bought it years ago, dreaming of road trips he never took, but he'd kept it clean. There was a small bedroom in back, a tiny kitchen, even a bathroom with a shower. Rain started as they brought in the last box. Thunder rolled overhead as Lydia arranged blankets on the pull-out couch where she'd sleep, leaving the bedroom for Tessa. Jack watched from his trailer window as lights glowed warm behind the RV's curtains. He could see Tessa's silhouette as she settled into her new space. Her voice carried faintly through the rain. "Maybe good people do exist." He thought about Tommy, about promises made and broken, about second chances disguised as obligations. The rain drummed steadily on the metal roof, washing away the last traces of spray paint from his walls. Morning crept over the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind puddles that reflected the breaking dawn. Jack stood at his kitchen window, watching steam rise from his coffee mug while his hands worked mechanically, cracking eggs into a pan. The old RV sat quietly in his backyard, still dripping from last night's rain. Through its windows, he caught glimpses of movement, Lydia getting Tessa ready for school. His weathered hands assembled a simple breakfast tray, scrambled eggs, slightly burned toast, and 2 cups of instant coffee. For Tessa, he added a small carton of orange juice he'd been saving. Jack's boots left wet prints on the grass as he approached the RV. He set the tray down carefully by their door, knocked twice, and retreated to his workshop. Through the reflection in his tools, he saw Lydia peek through the curtains, her expression a complex mixture of wariness and appreciation. The morning air was heavy with moisture as Jack tackled the broken fence along his property line. The repetitive motion of hammering loosened something in his chest, and he found himself humming an old country tune his mother used to sing. The melody carried him through the morning as he worked, replacing rotted boards and straightening posts that had gone crooked with age. Around noon, the sound of footsteps made him turn. Tessa stood there, holding 2 paper bags. "Mom made lunch," she said, offering one to him. "As thanks for breakfast." Jack wiped his hands on his jeans and accepted the bag. Inside was a simple sandwich and an apple. They sat together on an old log, eating in comfortable silence until Tessa's curiosity got the better of her. "What's that one mean?" she asked, pointing to a faded tattoo on his forearm, a broken chain with dates. Jack chewed slowly, considering his answer. "That's from when I got out. Each link is for a year inside." "Were you scared? In prison?" "Every day," he admitted. "But being scared ain't always bad. Sometimes it keeps you honest." Tessa traced her own arm thoughtfully. "That snake on your shoulder, is that from the Hells Angels?" Jack nodded. "Made too many wrong turns back then. Thought being tough meant being cruel." He paused, studying the half-eaten sandwich in his hands. "Took me a long time to learn different." The afternoon passed with Jack repairing his rickety porch steps. Each nail he drove felt like an investment in something he couldn't quite name. As dusk approached, he built a small fire in the yard, the flames casting dancing shadows across the ground. The crackling wood drew Tessa out first, then Lydia, who carried 3 mugs of hot chocolate. They sat around the fire, maintaining careful distances that somehow didn't feel like barriers. "Remember that time?" Tessa began, giggling. "When Mom tried to make Christmas cookies but set off the smoke alarm?" "Those weren't cookies," Lydia protested, a smile tugging at her lips. "They were modern art." Jack's deep chuckle surprised them all, including himself. It had been so long since he'd laughed that the sound felt foreign in his throat. But it broke something in the air, and suddenly stories were flowing. Tessa's first bike ride, Lydia's worst dating disaster, Jack's misadventure with a stubborn goat during his farming days. The laughter was tentative at first, like winter ice testing its strength, but it grew more confident with each shared tale. When the fire burned low and Tessa yawned, Lydia gathered their mugs and headed for the RV. At the door, she turned back. "Jack?" Her voice was soft but clear. "Thank you. For everything." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and watched them disappear inside. The night wrapped around him like an old familiar coat as he doused the fire's remains. Looking up at the vast expanse of stars, Jack felt something shift in his chest. "Maybe this is what forgiveness looks like," he muttered to the constellations above, tasting the unfamiliar hope in those words. Inside the RV, Lydia sat on the edge of her pull-out couch, hands clasped together. For the first time since Robert's death, she felt the urge to pray. The words came haltingly, uncertain whether she was asking for blessing or protection, for Jack's sake or her own heart's. "Dear God," she whispered, her voice barely disturbing the quiet night. "I don't know if I'm ready to trust again. But maybe you're not finished with any of us yet." The night settled around them all, Jack in his trailer, Lydia on her couch, Tessa dreaming in her narrow bed. 3 souls under the same stars, each carrying their own wounds, each discovering that healing sometimes comes in the most unexpected packages. Through the RV's thin walls, the sound of crickets created a gentle symphony, nature's lullaby for hearts learning to hope again. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, in this moment, peace seemed possible. It hung in the air like the last note of a beloved song, resonating with possibilities none of them had dared to imagine before. The day settled into a gentle rhythm at Jack's property, each sunrise bringing a new sense of normalcy to their unlikely arrangement. The morning light would catch Jack fixing something, a leaky faucet one day, a squeaky door the next, while Lydia sat at the RV's small table, scrolling through nursing job listings on her laptop. Tessa had adapted to online classes with surprising enthusiasm, setting up a makeshift study space on the RV's fold-out dining table. Her teachers sent assignments through email, and she worked diligently, occasionally asking Jack to help with math problems during his breaks. "You're pretty good at this stuff," Tessa remarked one afternoon, as Jack explained fractions using nuts and bolts from his toolbox. "Had to learn," he shrugged, arranging the pieces in neat rows. "Can't fix engines if you can't measure right." The summer heat made the days long and lazy. Jack picked up odd jobs around the neighborhood, fixing air conditioners, patching roofs, and doing basic car repairs. Word spread about his handyman skills, though some folks still eyed him suspiciously when he showed up on their doorstep. Lydia watched him through the RV window sometimes, noting how he'd remove his leather jacket while working, revealing arms mapped with faded tattoos. She caught herself wondering about their stories more often than she cared to admit. One evening, as they sat around the plastic folding table Jack had set up outside the RV, Tessa's curiosity got the better of her. The remains of a simple dinner, spaghetti and store-bought sauce, sat between them. "Do you have any kids?" she asked Jack, twirling pasta around her fork. The question landed like a stone in still water. Jack's hand paused halfway to his mouth, and something flickered across his weathered face. Pain, maybe, or regret. "Got a son," he said finally, setting down his fork. "Name's Nate." Lydia noticed how his fingers tightened around his water glass. Tessa, emboldened by his response, pressed on. "Where is he? Does he visit?" Jack's eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the tree line. "Haven't seen him in 15 years. His mama took him when I got locked up. Bar fight gone wrong. Put a man in the hospital." He cleared his throat. She was right to leave. Wouldn't have wanted my boy seeing his old man in chains. The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken stories. Tessa opened her mouth to ask more, but Lydia gently touched her arm, shaking her head. Later that night, after Tessa and Lydia had retired to the RV, Jack sat alone on his trailer's steps. In his calloused hands, he held a worn photograph, edges soft from years of handling. A young boy grinned at the camera, missing his front teeth, proudly holding up a fish nearly as big as himself. Behind him stood a younger Jack, without the gray in his beard, smile wide and uncomplicated. The crickets seemed to sing louder as Jack traced the image with his thumb, remembering the weight of his son on his shoulders, the sound of his laughter. He carefully returned the photo to his wallet, where it had lived for 15 years, a paper testament to everything he'd lost. Inside the RV, Lydia dreamed. In her dream, Robert, her late husband, sat at their old kitchen table, looking just as he had the morning before the accident. His kind eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled at her. "People can change, Lyd," he said, reaching across the table. But before she could touch his hand, she woke up, the words echoing in her mind like a forgotten song. The next morning, Jack rode into town for supplies. The hardware store needed visiting. The RV's air conditioning unit was acting up again, and they were running low on groceries. The summer heat had settled over the town like a heavy blanket, making the air thick and sluggish. As he loaded items into his saddlebags outside the hardware store, voices drifted over from the bench in front of the diner. Two men sat there, coffee cups in hand, speaking just loud enough to be heard. "Did you see that Coleman girl? Getting bigger by the day? No wonder she's hiding out with that ex-con. Shame about her daddy dying, but mixing with his kind ain't gonna help nothing." Jack's hands stilled on the straps of his saddlebags. The old familiar heat rose in his chest, the kind that used to end with broken bottles and bloody knuckles. His fingers curled into fists, muscle memory from countless fights rising to the surface. He turned slowly, taking one step toward the men, then another. They noticed him approaching, their faces shifting from smugness to uncertainty. "Got something to say?" Jack's voice came out low and dangerous. "About that girl?" The men stood, coffee forgotten. "Listen here," the taller one said, trying to sound tough despite his trembling hands. "People like you don't belong here. This ain't your town." Jack took another step forward, close enough now to smell their fear beneath the coffee and cologne. The old Jack would have thrown the first punch already, would have let his fists answer their hatred. His knuckles ached with the memory of violence. But then Tessa's face flashed in his mind. Her trust, her innocent questions about his tattoos, her smile when he helped with her homework. The rage subsided like a wave pulling back from shore, leaving only a hollow sadness in its wake. Without a word, Jack turned and walked back to his motorcycle. He could feel their eyes on him as he secured his supplies and started the engine. The ride home was a blur of asphalt and summer heat, his thoughts churning like storm clouds. When he pulled up to his property, Tessa was sitting on the porch steps, reading a book. She waved at him, her smile bright and uncomplicated. Just like that, the last traces of his anger melted away, replaced by something that felt dangerously close to peace. As he unloaded the supplies, Lydia watched from the RV window. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he moved, like a man containing something volatile. She recognized it, had seen it in Robert whenever he encountered injustice he couldn't fix. The storm brewing inside Jack was visible to her, even if he thought he'd hidden it well. The day settled into evening, crickets taking up their nightly chorus. But beneath the peaceful surface, Lydia sensed the undercurrents of change. In Jack's measured movements, in the way he kept glancing toward town, she read the signs of a man fighting battles that had nothing to do with fists or fury. The Sunday morning sun painted Jack's trailer park in soft golden light. Lydia stood at his door, her church dress smoothed nervously with fidgeting hands. She'd been standing there for nearly 5 minutes, gathering courage, before finally knocking. Jack opened the door, coffee mug in hand, looking surprised to see her so early. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, but he wore his usual worn leather vest over a black t-shirt. "Good morning," Lydia said, her voice gentle but uncertain. I was hoping you might join us for church today." Jack's eyebrows rose slightly. He took a slow sip of coffee, buying time. "It's just," Lydia continued quickly, "sometimes it helps to find peace in unexpected places. And Pastor Fields, he's different from what you might expect. He understands people who've been through hard times." Jack studied his coffee cup for a long moment. "Been a long time since anyone invited me to church," he said finally. "Most folks see the patches on my vest and figure I belong somewhere else." "You belong wherever you choose to be," Lydia said firmly, surprising herself with her conviction. A ghost of a smile touched Jack's lips. "Give me 15 minutes." Lydia's face brightened. "We'll wait in the car." True to his word, Jack emerged 14 minutes later. He hadn't changed his clothes, still wore his leather vest with its faded Hell's Angels patches, his heavy boots, his chain wallet. But his hair was combed, and there was something almost vulnerable in his expression. The drive to church was quiet, broken only by Tessa's occasional humming from the back seat. Small-town churches always looked the same to Jack. White wooden buildings reaching toward heaven with hopeful spires, their paint peeling slightly at the edges. This one was no different. As they walked up the steps, the whispers started. Jack heard them clearly, mothers pulling children closer, deacons watching him with suspicious eyes, elderly women clutching their purses tighter. He'd expected it, but it still stung. "Just ignore them," Tessa whispered, slipping her small hand into his rough one. "They whispered about us too when we first came. They'll get used to you." Inside, they found seats near the back. The wooden pew creaked under Jack's weight, and he tried to make himself smaller, less noticeable. But in his biker gear, surrounded by Sunday best, he might as well have been wearing neon. Pastor Warren Fields took the pulpit, his kind eyes scanning the congregation. He was younger than Jack expected, maybe early 50s, with laugh lines around his eyes and a gentle presence that filled the room. "Today," the pastor began, "we're going to talk about courage, not the kind that wins wars or fights battles, but the quiet kind that changes lives one small action at a time." Jack felt Lydia glance at him, but he kept his eyes forward. "True courage," Pastor Fields continued, "often looks like one person standing up when everyone else stays seated, one voice speaking truth when others remain silent, one act of kindness that ripples through generations." The pastor's words wrapped around Jack like a warm blanket. He thought of Tessa at the gas station, of her fear and confusion when the officer pushed her. He remembered the split second when he decided to step forward, not knowing it would change everything. Forgiveness, Pastor Fields said, his voice growing softer, making everyone lean in, is perhaps the greatest courage of all, to forgive others who have hurt us, to forgive ourselves for past mistakes, to believe that grace exists even for those society has written off. Jack felt something wet on his cheek and quickly wiped it away. Beside him, Lydia was very still, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. After the service, people filed out quickly, creating a noticeable bubble of space around Jack. He was used to it, had learned to expect it, but Lydia's face showed embarrassment and anger on his behalf. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I hoped they'd be more welcoming." But before Jack could respond, Pastor Fields approached them, hand extended. "Thank you for coming today," he said warmly, shaking Jack's hand. "And thank you for what you did at that gas station, standing up for justice. That's real Christianity, even if some folks can't see it yet." Jack shifted uncomfortably. "Just did what needed doing." "Sometimes that's all God asks of us," the pastor replied with a knowing smile. On the drive home, Lydia kept apologizing for the congregation's reaction until Jack finally held up his hand. "Maybe," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "Forgiveness starts in places that don't look holy. Maybe it starts at gas stations and trailer parks, with people who don't fit in church pews." Lydia fell silent, considering his words. That evening, they shared a casserole one of the church ladies had given Lydia weeks ago. The RV's small table barely fit the three of them, but somehow that made it better, more intimate. Tessa told jokes that made Jack laugh despite himself, and Lydia's smile seemed lighter, more natural. After dinner, Jack walked to his mailbox, more out of habit than expectation. Among the usual bills was a plain white envelope with no return address. His heart stuttered when he recognized the handwriting. Nate's handwriting, unchanged since high school. Back on his porch, Jack's hands trembled as he opened the letter. The paper inside was crisp, the words careful and clear. "Dad, I saw the video of you at the gas station. For a minute, I thought I was seeing things. But it was you, standing up for that girl, being the kind of man I always wished you were when I was young. You're braver than you used to be, Dad. Maybe we both are." Jack read the words over and over until they blurred. He walked to the edge of his property where the stars were clearest, their ancient light touching everything with silver. Tears rolled down his weathered cheeks, but he didn't wipe them away this time. The night was quiet except for crickets, and the soft sounds of Lydia and Tessa getting ready for bed in the RV. Jack stood there for a long time, holding his son's letter like it was made of glass, letting the tears fall where they would. These weren't the bitter tears of his prison years, or the angry tears of his drinking days. These were different. They felt like release, like something long frozen finally thawing in the warmth of grace. Above him, the stars continued their eternal dance, witnesses to one man's silent watershed moment in a humble trailer park where forgiveness had finally found its way home. Nate's letter burned like a warm ember in Jack's heart. He read it again over morning coffee, the paper already soft from handling. The words sparked something in him, a desire to prove his son's faith wasn't misplaced. "I want to organize a charity motorcycle rally," he announced that evening over dinner in the RV. Lydia looked up from her soup, eyebrows raised. Tessa stopped mid-bite. "For the community center," Jack continued, his gruff voice softening. "Their youth program's running on empty. Kids need somewhere safe after school, especially now." Lydia set down her spoon. "That's actually a wonderful idea, Jack. But organizing something that big... I've got contacts. Bikers from 3 states who'd ride for a good cause." He leaned forward, enthusiasm lighting his weathered features. "But I'll need help with the proper stuff. Permits, advertising, making it legitimate. I can do social media! Tessa bounced in her seat, her whole face lighting up. And design flyers. We learned about digital marketing in school. Lydia smiled, watching her daughter's excitement. I could help with logistics, paperwork. My hospital administration experience might be useful for something besides rejection letters. The next morning, they got to work. Tessa sat up at the RV's small table with her laptop, creating vibrant designs featuring motorcycles and rainbow-colored hands joined in unity. Jack watched, amazed, as she manipulated images and fonts with easy confidence. You've got a real talent there, kid, he said, making her beam. They started visiting local businesses, armed with Tessa's flyers and Jack's earnest pitch. At Joe's diner, the owner hesitated. A biker rally in our town? But looking at Tessa's hopeful face and Jack's steady gaze, he softened. Well, guess we could use some excitement around here. Put up your flyer. Some doors closed in their faces. Others opened cautiously. At the hardware store, the owner actually smiled. About time someone did something for those kids, she said, taking extra flyers to share. The sheriff's office was their biggest hurdle. Jack stood before Caleb Darnell's desk, permit application in hand. The sheriff studied it for a long time. You're really serious about this, aren't you, Hammer? Dead serious, Cal. These kids need to see there's good in the world, that people can change. Sheriff Darnell sighed, then reached for his stamp. One incident. One. And I shut it down. Won't happen, Jack promised. As weeks passed, something shifted in Tessa. Running errands, putting up flyers, joining Jack and Lydia for planning walks, she moved more, smiled more. Her clothes began fitting differently. Mom, she called one morning. My jeans are loose. Lydia found her daughter twirling in front of the RV's tiny bathroom mirror. Look at you, baby, she whispered, hugging Tessa from behind. You're glowing. The day of the rally dawned clear and cool. Jack stood at the community center's parking lot, watching the first rays paint the sky pink. By 8 o'clock, the rumble of motorcycles filled the air. They came in waves, leather-clad riders from all backgrounds, their bikes gleaming in the morning sun. Tessa ran between groups, taking pictures for social media, her camera catching smiles and handshakes between unlikely new friends. Lydia directed parking with calm efficiency, her nurse's authority keeping order in the chaos. Children from the youth program arrived, their eyes wide at the spectacle. A little girl approached Jack, tugging his jacket. Are you the nice biker from the video? She asked. The one who helped that girl? Jack knelt down. That's me. Want to sit on my bike for a picture? Her squeal of delight drew others, and soon Jack was lifting kids onto his Harley, showing them the controls, watching their faces light up with wonder. By noon, the crowd had swelled beyond their wildest hopes. Food trucks lined the edges, the smell of barbecue and tacos mixing with leather and exhaust. Music played from speakers Tessa had arranged, a mix of rock and soul that had people dancing between the bikes. The donation box filled steadily. Lydia counted discreetly throughout the day, her eyes growing wider each time. Finally, as the sun began its descent, Jack stood on the makeshift stage they'd constructed. The crowd fell quiet, waiting. He cleared his throat, suddenly nervous. Never been much for speeches, he began. Spent most of my life letting my fists do the talking. That didn't work out so well. A ripple of knowing laughter. But sometimes life gives you a second chance. Sometimes it takes a young girl's courage to show an old biker what really matters. He found Tessa in the crowd, her eyes shining. We can't rewrite yesterday, Jack continued, his voice growing stronger. Lord knows I've tried. But we can build tomorrow. Today proves that. Look around. We've got every kind of person here, all riding together, all caring about these kids' future." The silence was complete now, heavy with attention. That's what community means. Not agreeing on everything, but agreeing that every child deserves a chance. Every person deserves redemption. He paused, emotion threatening to choke his words. "Together we've raised over $5,000 for the youth program. That's not just money, that's hope. That's telling these kids they matter." The crowd erupted in cheers. Lydia pushed through them, tears streaming down her face, and wrapped Jack in a fierce hug. The cheering grew louder, punctuated by motorcycle engines revving in approval. Jack held Lydia close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of her tears through his shirt. Around them. The celebration continued. Bikers and townspeople mingling, children laughing, music playing. In that moment, with Lydia in his arms and Tessa beaming nearby, Jack finally understood what redemption felt like. It wasn't a single moment of forgiveness. It was building something new from the ashes of the old. It was the courage to try again, to love again, to believe in good again. The setting sun painted everything golden, and in that light, even the tears on people's faces looked like blessing. The autumn chill crept across town like a shadow, matching the darkness that was about to descend. 1 week after the triumphant motorcycle rally, Officer Brett Callan strutted into the police station, a smirk playing on his face. His lawyer had worked overtime, spinning a web of lies that caught everyone in its sticky threads. "False accusations," the morning news anchor declared. Officer Brett Callan, previously suspended for an alleged racial incident, has been fully reinstated after evidence emerged suggesting deliberate misrepresentation of events. Lydia's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the RV's linoleum floor. The television continued its merciless report. The viral video, which appeared to show Officer Callan using excessive force, has been called into question. Enhanced footage suggests selective editing and manipulation of context. Officer Callan's legal team has filed a defamation lawsuit against Jack Hanlon, the ex-convict who intervened in the incident. Tessa stood frozen in the doorway, her backpack hanging limply from one shoulder. "Mom, they're lying. You know they're lying." Lydia couldn't find words. She just pulled her daughter close, feeling the tremors running through the girl's body. Outside, dark clouds gathered, matching the mood that settled over their little sanctuary. Jack worked in his garage, trying to lose himself in engine repairs, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The radio droned on about his criminal record, painting him as a violent ex-con who had orchestrated a smear campaign against a respected officer. Around town, whispers grew louder. The same people who had cheered at the rally now crossed the street to avoid Jack. Shop owners who had donated to the cause suddenly remembered urgent appointments when he approached. That evening, as thunder rolled in the distance, 3 patrol cars pulled up to Jack's property, their lights painting everything in harsh red and blue. Sheriff Darnell stepped out first, his face a mask of professional detachment. "Jack," he called out, "we need to talk." Jack emerged from his garage, wiping his hands on a rag. "What's this about, Cal?" The sheriff held up a piece of paper. "Got a warrant here. There's been irregularities with the charity funds." "What irregularities?" Lydia demanded, stepping onto her RV's small porch. $5,000 is missing from the youth program account, Darnell explained, his voice heavy. "And there's been a suspicious deposit in Jack's personal account." Jack's face went pale. "That's impossible. I never touched that money. Every penny went straight to the program director." "Then you won't mind explaining this bank statement?" Officer Callan appeared from behind one of the patrol cars, waving a document with evident satisfaction. Tessa burst out of the RV. He's lying. Officer Callan's trying to frame Jack because of what happened at the gas station. Tessa, honey, go back inside, Lydia pleaded. But her daughter stood her ground. No, this isn't right. Jack helped all those kids. He made people believe in good things again. Tessa. Jack's voice was quiet but firm. Listen to your mama. Rain began to fall, fat drops that felt like tears from heaven. Sheriff Darnell produced handcuffs, the metal gleaming dully in the patrol car lights. Jack Hanlon, you're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. The words washed over Jack like the rain, but he barely heard them. He kept his eyes on Tessa, trying to project strength as the cuffs clicked around his wrists. I didn't do it, kid, he said softly. Remember that. Tessa broke free from her mother's grasp and ran to Jack, throwing her arms around him despite the handcuffs. I know you didn't. I know. Officer Callan grabbed her shoulder, pulling her back roughly. That's enough. Get in the car, Hanlon. Lydia watched helplessly as they led Jack away, his shoulders straight despite the weight of the accusations. The patrol car doors slammed shut, and through the rain-streaked window, she could see his profile. Still proud, still unbowed. At the county jail, Jack sat in a sparse holding cell, refusing all offers of legal representation. The guards exchanged puzzled looks as he declined call after call. You need a lawyer, Hanlon, one guard insisted. This is serious time you're looking at. Jack just shook his head. I ain't going back to Haight, he whispered. Won't give them the satisfaction of seeing me angry. Hours turned into a long, sleepless night. Back at the trailer, Lydia paced, her prayers becoming increasingly desperate. Lord, where are you in this? How can you let this happen to a good man? But only silence answered her. She thought of her late husband, of justice denied, of all the times the system had failed those who deserved better. Around 3 a.m, she heard movement outside. Running to the window, she caught a glimpse of Tessa disappearing into the darkness, a backpack on her shoulder. Tessa! She screamed, bursting out into the rain. Tessa, come back! But her daughter was gone, swallowed by the night. Lydia collapsed onto the porch steps, soaked to the skin, her faith crumbling like sand between her fingers. Dawn approached with cruel indifference. Lydia stood on Jack's porch, staring at the empty RV where her daughter should have been sleeping. Everything they'd built, everything they'd begun to believe in, lay in ruins around her. God, she whispered into the gray morning light, her voice breaking. Don't let this be the end. Please, don't let this be the end. The words hung in the air like the last notes of a funeral song, heavy with grief and desperate hope. The empty property stretched before her, Jack's garage silent, his tools untouched, the motorcycle rally posters now soggy scraps in the mud. Everything that had felt so right just days ago now seemed like a cruel joke. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling more alone than she had since her husband's death. Somewhere out there, her daughter was running from pain. Jack sat in a cell refusing to fight back with hatred, and justice seemed as distant as the stars hidden behind the storm clouds. The morning light grew stronger, but for Lydia, standing alone on that porch, the darkness had never felt more complete. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the county jail, casting harsh shadows across Jack's weathered face. 2 days had passed since they'd led him away in handcuffs, but it felt like 2 years. He sat on the thin mattress of his cot, watching dust motes dance in the artificial light. His new cellmate, a young man who couldn't be more than 22, paced the small space like a caged animal. The kid had introduced himself only as Reed, spitting the name out like it tasted bad. Outside their cell, life in the jail moved with mechanical precision. Guards made their rounds, Metal doors clanged shut, and somewhere down the corridor, someone was crying. Jack's thoughts drifted to the motorcycle rally. Just days ago, the parking lot had been full of chrome and leather, hope and second chances. Now his phone was full of cancellation messages from fellow riders. The betrayal stung worse than the arrest. "Heard you're that biker who got caught stealing from kids," Reed sneered, interrupting Jack's thoughts. "So much for being a hero, huh?" Jack met the young man's eyes steadily. "I didn't take that money." "Right," Reed laughed bitterly. "And I'm innocent too, aren't we all?" The boy's anger was familiar. Jack recognized it like looking in an old mirror. He'd carried that same rage once, letting it poison everything it touched. Meanwhile, across town, Lydia Coleman sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. The screen showed dozens of hateful messages from people she'd once called neighbors. "Go back where you came from. This is what happens when you trust criminals. You and your daughter ruined a good man's career." Her hands trembled as she deleted each one. The church group chat was just as bad. People who'd hugged her Sunday morning now questioned her judgment, her character, even her faith. A few kind souls from the congregation had helped her search for Tessa, driving through town with flashlights and worried faces. But after 48 hours, they'd found nothing. No trace of her 15-year-old daughter who'd disappeared into the rain. "Lord," Lydia whispered, pressing her forehead against the cool table surface, "please keep my baby safe." The phone rang, making her jump. It was Pastor Mike, his voice gentle but tired. "Any news?" she asked. "Nothing yet, Lydia. We've checked the bus station again and called all the shelters in 3 counties. We'll keep looking." After hanging up, Lydia walked to the window. The empty RV sat like a ghost in Jack's backyard, a reminder of how quickly safety could vanish. Back in the jail cell, Reed was on another tirade. "You know what's funny?" he spat. "Some people still believe in God in here, like he's gonna reach down and fix everything with a miracle." Jack remained silent, letting the boy's words wash over him. "I saw you looking at that Bible they hand out," Reed continued. "Don't tell me you buy into that forgiveness garbage?" Jack shifted on his cot, studying the young man's face. "I used to think like you," he said quietly. Reed stopped pacing. "What?" "That anger you're carrying? I know it. Lived with it for 30 years. Jack's voice was steady. "Nearly killed me." "Oh, what? Now you're gonna tell me Jesus saved you?" Reed's laugh was sharp with mockery. "No," Jack replied. "I'm still figuring that part out myself." For the first time, something uncertain flickered across Reed's face. The afternoon light slanted through the high window, painting bars of shadow across the cell floor. Jack felt something shift inside him, like a key turning in a rusty lock. Slowly, deliberately, he knelt beside his cot. Reed watched in disbelief as the old biker bowed his head. "What are you doing?" Reed's voice wavered between scorn and curiosity. "Praying," Jack answered simply. "For what? A miracle?" "No." Jack closed his eyes. "For the strength to forgive the men who put me here." Reed fell silent, watching as Jack remained kneeling, his weathered hands clasped together. Miles away, in an abandoned church on the outskirts of town, Tessa huddled in a corner of the dusty sanctuary. Her phone battery was almost dead, but she couldn't stop watching the video. She'd recorded it by accident, really, her phone still running after filming some rally preparations. Officer Callan hadn't noticed her behind the storage shed when he'd bragged to his partner about the plan. "Frame the ex-con, get rid of the troublemaker nurse and her brat." His voice was cruel and clear in the recording. "Plant some money in his account, and no one will believe him over us." Tears rolled down Tessa's cheeks as she played it again. She had the proof to free Jack, but terror kept her frozen. What if they came after her mother next? What if they hurt Jack worse for fighting back? The old church creaked around her, decades of forgotten prayers echoing in its empty halls. Tessa pulled her knees to her chest, her phone clutched like a lifeline. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the darkness. "I'm so sorry, Jack." The sun was setting outside, painting the broken stained glass windows in shades of gold and red. Tessa's stomach growled. She'd rationed her snacks carefully, but they wouldn't last much longer. She thought of her mother, probably sick with worry. She thought of Jack in his cell, still protecting others by choosing peace over vengeance. The video played one final time before her phone died completely, leaving her alone in the growing darkness. The truth felt like a heavy stone in her chest. She held the key to Jack's freedom, but using it meant facing everything she feared. Tessa curled up on the hard wooden pew, using her backpack as a pillow. Through a hole in the church's roof, she could see the first stars appearing. "God," she whispered, echoing Jack's quiet strength. "Help me be brave." The night settled over the town like a heavy blanket, over the jail where Jack prayed for his enemies, over Lydia's empty house where a mother's tears fell silently, and over the abandoned church where a young girl guarded the truth that could change everything. 3 hearts beat in the darkness, each carrying their own burden of love, fear, and the desperate hope that somehow justice would find its way home. The morning sun had barely touched the horizon when Tessa stumbled into the sheriff's office. Her clothes were wrinkled from sleeping in the church, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. Sheriff Darnell looked up from his desk, surprise crossing his weathered face. "Tessa, your mama's been worried sick. I have something you need to see," she interrupted, her voice trembling as she pulled out her phone. Her hands shook so badly that the sheriff had to hold it steady. As Officer Callan's voice filled the quiet office, Sheriff Darnell's expression hardened. He played the recording 3 times, each time his jaw tightening further. "You did good, girl," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "Real good." Within the hour, the sheriff called an emergency press conference on the courthouse steps. News vans crowded the street as he played the recording for the gathered crowd. Gasps and angry murmurs rippled through the onlookers. "Based on this evidence," Sheriff Darnell announced, "Jack Hanlon is being released immediately. Officer Callan will face charges for corruption and false imprisonment." Lydia, who'd been watching the news at home, grabbed her keys and raced to the courthouse. She arrived just as Jack emerged from the heavy wooden doors. He looked tired but peaceful, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he saw them. Tessa ran to him first, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I'm sorry I ran away," she sobbed. "I was scared." "You came back," Jack said softly, hugging her close. "That's what matters." Lydia approached more slowly, tears streaming down her face. "You kept your faith," she whispered, touching his arm. Jack shook his head gently. "No, your girl did." His voice was thick with emotion. "She's the brave one." That evening, they gathered around Jack's small kitchen table. Someone had left a casserole on the porch with a note that simply said, "We're sorry." More notes appeared throughout the day, tucked under windshield wipers, taped to the mailbox, left on the doorstep. The 3 of them shared the meal in comfortable silence, passing dishes without needing to ask. Tessa's laugh bubbled up at something Jack said, and Lydia reached across to squeeze his hand. The moment felt different, like puzzle pieces finally falling into place, like strangers becoming family. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fresh paint and sawdust as Jack surveyed the renovated community center. The leftover rally funds had stretched far, transforming the once vandalized building into something beautiful. A new sign hung proudly above the entrance: the Hanlon Hope House, where second chances begin. "It's perfect, Dad," came a voice behind him. Nate stood there, tool belt around his waist, his eyes misty. The past 3 weeks of working side by side had melted decades of hurt between them. Jack turned to his son, and without warning, Nate pulled him into a tight embrace. "I'm sorry," Nate whispered, his shoulders shaking, "for staying away so long." "I'm the one who's sorry, son," Jack's voice cracked. "I wasn't the father you deserved." Inside, Tessa sat cross-legged with a group of kids, her voice confident as she led a discussion about self-worth. The children hung on her every word, especially when she shared her own story of finding strength. Lydia watched from the doorway, still wearing her scrubs from her new job at the Mountain View Clinic. Her face glowed with pride. At Tessa, at the center, at how far they'd all come. Church volunteers bustled around, organizing donated supplies and planning upcoming events. Later that evening, as they sat on Jack's porch watching the sunset, Lydia turned to him. "I never expected to fall in love again," she said softly, "especially not with someone like you. But you've shown me that people really can change." Jack's weathered face softened into a smile. "I think God just rides a different road than we do," he said, taking her hand. "Sometimes the longest way around turns out to be the shortest way home." 6 months after the Hope House opened its doors, the southern heat returned with a vengeance. Jack guided his Harley into the familiar gas station where his journey had begun. The faded sign still creaked in the wind, but something felt different now. Lighter, somehow. As he filled his tank, movement caught his eye. A young biker, barely 20, stood at the counter inside. Through the grimy window, Jack could see the kid's hands shaking as he counted out loose change. The cashier's impatient tapping echoed through the store. Jack's weathered boots carried him inside. The cool air hit his face as he approached the counter, taking in the young man's patched jacket and hollow eyes. Those eyes reminded him of someone, himself, decades ago, when pride and hunger fought daily battles. "How much short are you?" Jack asked quietly. The young biker's shoulders tensed. "I can handle it," he mumbled, but his trembling fingers told a different story. "Son, there ain't no shame in a helping hand," Jack said, pulling out his wallet. To the cashier, he added, "Put his gas on my tab, and add that sandwich there too." Before the young man could protest, Jack handed him the wrapped sandwich. "Keep the change," he said with a knowing grin, "and keep your soul clean. That's worth more than any tank of gas." Something shifted in the young biker's expression. Recognition, maybe, or hope. Jack saw his own past reflected in those eyes, along with the possibility of a different future. As Jack rode away, the town spread out before him like a canvas repainted with brighter colors. The Hope House had sparked something in this community. Not just change, but transformation. Where broken windows once gaped, fresh paint now gleamed. Where suspicious glares once met strangers, neighborly waves had become common. He pulled into the Hope House parking lot, now full with cars of volunteers and visitors. Lydia knelt in the flower beds she'd planted along the walkway, her hands deep in the rich soil. Marigolds and petunias created a rainbow welcome mat for anyone seeking refuge. "Welcome home," she called out, brushing dirt from her knees as she stood to greet him. Her smile still made his heart skip, even after all these months. Inside, Tessa sat surrounded by younger students, her confidence radiating as she read from a paper in her hands. Jack paused in the doorway, listening as she shared her winning essay with her rapt audience. "The man who taught me courage," she read, her voice strong and clear. "I used to think heroes wore capes or carried badges, but sometimes heroes wear leather jackets and carry years of regret like medals of honor. Sometimes they show up exactly when you need them, not because they're perfect, but because they're brave enough to be imperfect in all the right ways. Jack felt tears prick at his eyes as she continued reading. Her words painted pictures of that first confrontation, of quiet dinners in an old RV, of a community learning to see past appearances to the heart beneath. As she reached the final line, her voice softened with emotion. Sometimes angels wear leather and carry scars, but they still ride for heaven. The room burst into applause, but Jack stayed in the doorway, overwhelmed by the grace of second chances and the power of simple acts of kindness. In the warm afternoon light, surrounded by the family he'd found and the community he'd helped heal, he finally felt at peace. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.